Most people believe that winning is loud. They believe success belongs to the aggressive, the outspoken, the fast-moving. The one who answers immediately. The one who dominates the room. The one who reacts first. We have been taught that speed is intelligence. That visibility is power. That response is strength. But if you look closely at your own life, you will see something different. Think about the moments you regret. The argument you responded to too quickly. The email you sent too emotionally. The opportunity you rushed into because you feared missing it. The partnership you accepted because the pressure felt urgent. The decision made to relieve anxiety instead of to create advantage. Most regret is not caused by lack of effort, is caused by lack of strategic pause. You are not incapable. You are unregulated. Strategic thinking is not about manipulation. It is not about cold calculation. It is not about becoming emotionless or distant. Strategic thinking is emotional discipline applied to decision-making. It is the ability to step back while others step forward impulsively, observe while others announce, understand while others argue, position while others perform. And here is the truth most people do not want to hear. The loudest person in the room is rarely the one in control. Control belongs to the one who sees more than others see, who anticipates reactions before they occur, who understands timing, who understands people, who understands themselves. This audiobook is not about becoming dominant, is about becoming deliberate. It is not about overpowering others, is about outlasting impulsiveness. Because when you learn to think strategically, you stop living in reaction. You stop being emotionally recruited into other people's urgency. You stop mistaking movement for progress. You begin to see patterns. You begin to read rooms. You begin to sense pressure before it turns into conflict. You begin to anticipate outcomes before they arrive. And quietly, your decisions begin to compound. Over the next chapters, you will learn how to pause without appearing weak. How to read situations before making a move. How to master emotional control so your feelings inform you but do not command you. How to use silence as leverage. How to avoid unnecessary battles. How to think 3 steps ahead without anxiety. How to build influence without force. And how to win quietly, in work, in relationships, and within yourself. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming regulated enough to access the intelligence you already have. Strategic thinking is not a tactic. It is an identity. And by the end of this audiobook, you will no longer react to life. You will position yourself within it. Pause here. Breathe. We begin with the silent advantage. Chapter 1: The Silent Advantage. There is a quiet power most people overlook. It does not announce itself. It does not interrupt. It does not rush to prove a point. It watches. In a world that rewards speed, the ability to pause feels unnatural. When a message arrives, you feel the urge to respond immediately. When challenged, you feel the pull to defend yourself instantly. When presented with an opportunity, you feel the pressure to decide on the spot. But urgency is not authority. Urgency is often emotional discomfort disguised as importance. Most people live in reaction mode. They respond to tone, not substance. They react to pressure, not context. They speak to relieve tension, not to create clarity. And because of this, they reveal too much, commit too early, and move without understanding the board they are standing on. The silent advantage begins the moment you decide not to react automatically. Strategic thinkers understand something simple but powerful: information flows toward the quiet observer. When you speak less, people fill the silence. When you react less, people reveal more. When you delay response, pressure shifts away from you. Silence is not passivity. It is positioning. Consider how often conversations are lost because someone felt the need to respond instantly. A colleague challenges your idea in a meeting. The emotional reaction rises. Defensiveness, irritation, the need to protect your image. If you answer immediately, your response is shaped by emotion. But if you pause, even for 3 seconds, the room changes. That pause communicates thoughtfulness. It communicates stability. It subtly shifts authority toward you. Others begin to listen more carefully because you are not scrambling to speak. Strategic thinking begins with this internal rule. Never respond from your first emotion. Your first emotion is data. It is not direction. When something triggers you, frustration, excitement, fear, urgency, That feeling is information. It tells you what matters to you. It signals a boundary, a desire, or a threat. But acting on it immediately hands over control. Emotion without pause becomes exposure. Pause creates separation. And separation creates power. The difference between reactive people and strategic thinkers is not intelligence. It is regulation. Reactive people are ruled by the immediate. They seek relief from discomfort. They want to end tension quickly. They mistake quick closure for control. Strategic thinkers tolerate temporary discomfort in exchange for long-term positioning. They allow silence to exist in the room. They allow others to over-explain. They allow pressure to sit without absorbing it. And because they wait, they see what others miss. They notice inconsistencies in tone. They detect insecurity behind aggression. They observe alliances forming quietly. They sense hesitation where confidence is being performed. You cannot see these things when you are busy reacting. Observation requires stillness. This is why those who speak less often know more. When you are not preparing your next sentence, you are free to analyze patterns. When you are not defending your ego, you can evaluate the structure of the situation. When you are not trying to impress, you can assess leverage. In workplace politics, this becomes critical. The person who reacts emotionally to criticism reveals their insecurities. The one who responds with calm curiosity gathers information. The one who stays composed under pressure becomes perceived as stable. Stability attracts influence. Entrepreneurs who rush decisions often do so to escape uncertainty. Leaders who panic under pressure reveal fragility. High achievers who overwork to prove themselves leak their internal anxiety into their behavior. But the calm observer? They do not rush. They ask one more question. They wait one more day. They listen 1 minute longer than everyone else. And that minute often changes everything. The silent advantage is not about being quiet all the time. It is about choosing when to speak instead of feeling compelled to speak. Every word is a commitment. Every reaction is information. Every emotional display shifts power. Strategic thinkers understand that once something is said, it cannot be unsaid. Once a position is declared, flexibility narrows. Once emotion is exposed, others calibrate their approach accordingly. So they conserve expression. They let others underestimate them. Underestimation is a form of camouflage. When people assume you are less aware than you are, they reveal their true intentions more freely. When they assume you are neutral, they show their strategy. When they assume you are unthreatening, they stop guarding themselves. And you gather information quietly. This does not mean being manipulative. It means being disciplined. There is a difference. Discipline is internal control. Manipulation is external control. Strategic thinking begins internally. You regulate your impulses. You slow your responses. You observe before engaging. Over time, something shifts. You begin to feel less pulled by other people's urgency. You stop feeling responsible for fixing every misunderstanding instantly. You no longer need to defend yourself at every hint of disagreement. You become comfortable in silence. And silence, used correctly, is unsettling to those who depend on noise. When someone tries to provoke you and you remain steady, they lose rhythm. When someone pressures you and you do not rush, they lose leverage. When someone expects immediate reaction and receives thoughtful pause, they reassess you. You become harder to read. And that is power. But this power is not aggressive. It is controlled. In your daily life, begin practicing one discipline. Delay your response by intention. Not to manipulate. Not to appear superior. But to gather information. When an email irritates you, wait. When a proposal excites you, pause. When someone criticizes you, breathe before replying. That small gap between stimulus and response is where strategy lives. Most people collapse that gap. Strategic thinkers expand it. And inside that expanded space, you will find clarity. You will notice that not everything requires an immediate answer. Not every disagreement requires defense. Not every opportunity requires instant acceptance. You will see patterns forming before others do. You will feel shifts in tone before words confirm them. You will anticipate outcomes before they arrive. Because you are no longer reacting. You are observing. And from observation comes understanding. From understanding comes positioning. And from positioning comes quiet advantage. This is where strategic thinking begins. Not with complex tactics, but with silence. Chapter 2: The difference between reacting and strategizing. Most people do not realize how much of their life is governed by reaction. Not intention, not vision, not long-term positioning. Reaction. An email arrives with a sharp tone, and the body tightens before the mind has assessed. A colleague challenges your idea in a meeting, and your heart rate rises before you have evaluated whether the challenge even matters. A client hesitates, and you begin adjusting your value downward before confirming the objection. This is not weakness. It is unexamined impulse. Reacting is immediate. It is fast. It feels powerful because it feels active. The nervous system interprets movement as control. But reaction is rarely control. It is usually surrender to emotion, surrender to pressure, surrender to the fear of losing status, approval, or momentum. Strategizing is different. Strategizing begins with interruption. An internal pause. Not a visible delay. Not an awkward silence. But a subtle psychological step back. When something happens, most people collapse the entire process into one motion: event, feeling, action. It feels seamless. It feels natural. It feels automatic. But the strategic mind separates these. Event, feeling, interpretation, choice. That separation is power. When you react, you confuse feeling with instruction. You assume that because you feel anger, you must confront. Because you feel fear, you must secure. Because you feel urgency, you must decide. Because you feel disrespected, you must respond. But emotions are data. They are not commands. They tell you something is happening inside you. They do not tell you what the optimal move is. A strategic thinker understands this distinction deeply. They allow emotion to surface, but they do not allow it to steer. Imagine a chess player who moves every time their opponent moves without considering the board. They would lose quickly. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they are playing emotionally instead of positionally. Most adults live positionally unaware. They defend themselves in conversations that did not require defense. They explain themselves when silence would have increased authority. They argue to win small points and lose long-term leverage. They rush to secure reassurance instead of strengthening their position. Reacting is short-term relief. Strategizing is long-term control. When you react, you relieve internal discomfort. You speak to release tension. You decide to quiet anxiety. You respond to prove something. It feels satisfying in the moment. But satisfaction is not strategy. Strategy asks a different question. Not, how do I feel right now? But, what outcome do I want? That question changes everything. When you begin filtering your behavior through outcome rather than emotion, you begin to shift from reactive living to intentional positioning. This does not mean suppressing yourself. It does not mean becoming cold. It means installing a delay between stimulus and response. And that delay is not weakness. It is leverage. Consider workplace politics. Someone challenges you publicly. A reactive response might be sharp, defensive, or overly explanatory. It may protect ego in the moment. But a strategic response might be a calm acknowledgement, a clarifying question, or even silence. It might redirect the conversation instead of escalating it. The reactive person feels strong because they spoke. The strategic person becomes strong because they chose. Entrepreneurs often react to market shifts with panic pivots. High achievers react to criticism by overworking. Emotionally overwhelmed adults react to uncertainty by seeking immediate control. Strategic thinkers assess first. What is real here? What is assumption? What is temporary? What is signal? What is noise? You begin to see that not every emotion deserves action. Sometimes anger is revealing insecurity. Sometimes urgency is revealing fear of irrelevance. Sometimes the need to respond is revealing ego, not necessity. The difference between reacting and strategizing is not intelligence. It is regulation. A regulated mind can sit with discomfort without dissolving into it. It can tolerate ambiguity without rushing into premature decisions. It can allow others to reveal themselves fully before choosing a position. Strategic thinking requires emotional stamina. It requires resisting the impulse to immediately defend, prove, fix, or secure. When you stop reacting automatically, something powerful happens. You begin to observe patterns. You notice who escalates when challenged, who withdraws under pressure, who performs confidence but avoids accountability, who uses urgency to control others, who thrives on emotional chaos. You would never see these patterns if you were busy reacting to each moment. Reaction keeps you inside the wave. Strategy places you above it. And this shift is subtle but transformative. The next time you feel compelled to respond immediately, pause internally and ask, is this move reducing my discomfort or increasing my position? That single question becomes your internal filter. If the action only soothes emotion, delay it. If the action advances your long-term outcome, consider it carefully. Strategic thinking does not eliminate emotion. It integrates it without surrendering to it. You are allowed to feel anger. You are allowed to feel threatened. You are allowed to feel anxious. But you are not required to move because of it. When you master this separation, you stop being predictable. And unpredictability, when rooted in calm, becomes quiet power. The world will continue to move quickly. Conversations will still spark emotion. Pressure will still exist. Deadlines will still compress time. But inside you, something changes. There is space. And in that space, there is choice. Strategic thinkers live in that space. Not rushed. Not passive. Not detached from reality. But aware. Measured. Positioned. The difference between reacting and strategizing is not loud. It is not dramatic. It will not be applauded. It is internal. It is disciplined. And over time, it separates those who are constantly fighting fires from those who quietly shape outcomes. Pause here. Notice where you have been reacting. Notice where you can begin choosing. The board is always larger than the moment. Chapter 3. Seeing the board before making a move. Most people step into situations the way they step into cold water. Quickly. Reactively. Hoping the discomfort fades. They focus on the surface, what was said, what was done, what appears urgent. They lock onto the visible piece of the situation and move from there. And when the outcome collapses, they say, I didn't see that coming. But the truth is not that it was invisible. It is that they were too close to see the board. Strategic thinkers zoom out before they move in. They understand that no situation exists in isolation. Every conversation sits inside a structure. Every conflict sits inside a power dynamic. Every opportunity sits inside timing, leverage, pressure, and incentives. And if you do not see those elements, you are not playing the full game. You are reacting to a single piece. Imagine a chessboard. An inexperienced player sees the piece in front of them. They react to the immediate threat. They protect. They attack. They respond. A strategic player sees the entire board. They understand positioning. They recognize patterns. They see which pieces are active, which are passive, which are exposed, and which are quietly influencing the future. The difference is not intelligence. It is perspective. In life, most people are staring at one square. Strategic thinkers see the whole board. When someone criticizes you at work, most people respond to the words. They defend. They explain. They counter. But what is the board? Is this about performance or status? Is this about feedback or positioning? Is this person under pressure themselves? Is there an audience? Is there competition involved? What happens if you respond immediately? What happens if you respond later? The board includes timing. It includes incentives. It includes what others stand to gain. It includes what is not being said. If you only respond to the surface, you will always be late to the deeper game. This is why emotional regulation is necessary before strategic awareness. If you are flooded with reaction, you cannot zoom out. You are inside the moment instead of above it. Strategic thinking requires altitude. When you feel triggered, that is not the moment to move. That is the moment to gather information. Pressure is not a command. It is data. If someone rushes you for a decision, that rush itself is information. Why the urgency? Who benefits from speed? What changes if you wait? Most mistakes are mistimed actions. The decision may not have been wrong. The timing was. You can say the right thing at the wrong moment and lose influence. You can make the right move under the wrong pressure and lose leverage. You can take the right opportunity before you are positioned to sustain it and create instability. Correctness without context is ineffective. Strategic thinkers prioritize context over ego. They ask, what is happening beneath the visible layer? What forces are at play? Who has leverage? Who is anxious? Who is overconfident? Where's the real pressure? They do not assume. They observe. In professional environments, this is critical. Workplace politics are rarely about tasks. They are about perception, alliances, power distribution, and timing. If you only focus on doing your job well without reading the structure around you, you may be competent but strategically blind. Entrepreneurs often fail not because their idea is weak, but because the market timing is wrong. The demand is not mature. The positioning is unclear. The competition is misjudged. High achievers burn out not because they lack discipline, but because they do not see the long-term cost of constantly reacting to every opportunity. Seeing the board means you stop asking, is this good or bad? And you start asking, where does this sit in the larger structure? Every move has ripple effects. If you confront someone publicly, what alliances shift? If you decline an opportunity, what space opens? If you stay silent, what information emerges? If you escalate, what resistance forms? Strategic awareness is the art of mapping consequences before committing to action. This does not mean paralysis. It means calibration. You do not need to calculate endlessly. You need to pause long enough to see beyond the immediate. There are 4 invisible elements in almost every situation: power, timing, pressure, pace. Power asks, who actually holds influence here? Timing asks, is this moment ripe or premature? Pressure asks, who feels urgency and why? Pace asks, is this moving too fast or too slow for advantage? When you begin observing through these lenses, your behavior shifts naturally. You interrupt less. You announce less. You defend less. You study more. You stop being seduced by emotional immediacy. Instead of saying, I need to respond now, you begin to say, I need to understand first. Understanding creates leverage. And leverage allows you to act once, instead of correcting yourself repeatedly. There is a quiet confidence that comes from seeing more than others see. When you recognize patterns, you stop being surprised by predictable behavior. You notice who always speaks under insecurity, who always pushes when they lack control, who flatters before asking for something, who creates urgency when they are losing position. Patterns repeat. Strategic thinkers notice repetition before others notice consequences. But this requires restraint. You cannot see the board if you are always trying to prove yourself on it. You cannot read the structure if you are emotionally invested in winning every square. Sometimes the most powerful move is not advancing. It is observing long enough to understand the game others are unconsciously playing. And once you see it clearly, your moves become simpler, cleaner, more precise. You waste less energy. You recover faster from missteps. You no longer feel pulled into every situation, because you understand something fundamental. Not every moment demands action. Every moment demands awareness. When you cultivate the discipline to zoom out before you move in, your decisions begin to carry weight. They are fewer, but they are stronger. And slowly, without noise, you begin to operate at a different level. You are no longer reacting to pieces. You are reading the board. Pause. Let that settle. In the next chapter, we deepen this skill further, by learning how to read people before they reveal themselves. Because the board is not only made of circumstances. It is made of human nature. Chapter 4. Reading people without saying a word. Most people believe they are good at reading others. They believe intuition alone is enough. They believe tone is obvious. They believe deception is dramatic. It rarely is. In reality, most people do not read others. They project onto them. They assume agreement because someone nods. They assume loyalty because someone smiles. They assume respect because someone is quiet. Strategic thinkers do not assume. They observe. Reading people is not about suspicion. It is about clarity. It is not about paranoia. It is about pattern recognition. When you walk into a room, before you speak, there is already information available to you. Posture, eye movement, energy shifts. Who stands near whom? Who avoids eye contact? Who interrupts? Who overexplains? Who becomes overly agreeable? These details are subtle, but they are never random. A person's body often speaks before their mouth does. Watch how someone sits when challenged. Do they lean forward with curiosity, or lean back defensively? Notice how quickly they respond to difficult questions. Immediate answers can signal preparation, or rehearsed positioning. Observe micro-delays. That small pause before answering. That glance sideways. That tightening of the jaw. You are not looking for guilt. You are looking for alignment. Alignment between words and body. Alignment between tone and message. Alignment between behavior and stated values. When alignment is present, people feel grounded. When it is absent, something feels slightly off. Most people ignore that feeling because they want harmony. Strategic thinkers investigate it silently. Tone is another signal most overlook. Words carry content. Tone carries intention. Two people can say the same sentence and mean entirely different things. I understand. It can mean agreement. It can mean dismissal. It can mean, I am waiting for you to finish. It can mean, I disagree but I will not say it here. Listen not just to what is said, but to what is emphasized. Is the person speaking slowly and deliberately, or quickly and defensively? Is their tone steady, or does it spike when certain topics arise? Emotional spikes reveal sensitivity. Sensitivity reveals pressure points. And pressure points reveal leverage, not for manipulation, but for understanding where fragility lives. Inconsistency is another powerful signal. Strategic thinkers track patterns over time. Anyone can perform for a moment. Very few can sustain a false pattern. If someone consistently praises you in public but undermines you in private, that is not random. If someone agrees in meetings but delays execution afterward, that is not confusion. If someone's story shifts slightly each time it is told, that is not forgetfulness. Patterns do not lie. People reveal themselves through repetition. The impatient person will rush again. The defensive person will deflect again. The insecure leader will seek validation again. The opportunist will reposition again. Your job is not to confront every pattern. Your job is to register it. Strategic thinking requires memory. Not emotional memory, factual memory. What did they say last time? How did they behave under stress? Who did they protect when conflict arose? These details matter. But here is the discipline. You do not react to what you observe immediately. You collect data. When you react too soon, you reveal what you know. When you reveal what you know, people adjust their behavior. When they adjust, you lose clarity. Silence preserves visibility. You must also learn to read yourself while reading others. Notice what triggers you. Notice who makes you feel rushed. Notice who makes you overly eager to impress. Notice who subtly diminishes your confidence. These reactions are information, not weakness. If someone consistently creates urgency around you, ask yourself why. If someone frequently interrupts you, ask yourself what position they are asserting. Someone flatters excessively, ask yourself what outcome they desire. People rarely act without motive. And motives are rarely announced. The strategic thinker does not assume malicious intent. But they also do not assume purity. They remain neutral. Curious. Observant. In workplace politics, this skill becomes essential. Not everyone who smiles at you supports you. Not everyone who challenges you opposes you. Some challenge to test strength. Some smile to test vulnerability. If you cannot read this distinction, you will misplace trust and misdirect energy. Entrepreneurs must read investors. Leaders must read teams. Professionals must read supervisors. And emotionally overwhelmed individuals must learn to read relationships before overcommitting. Because once you commit, emotionally, financially, professionally, your flexibility decreases. Reading first protects positioning. There is also power in noticing who speaks the least. Often, the quietest person in the room holds the most information. Observe who others glance toward before making decisions. Observe who conversations subtly orbit around. Influence is not always loud. Often, it is gravitational. Do not underestimate the silent observer. Become one. Reading people without speaking gives you advantage without confrontation. You do not need to expose every inconsistency. You do not need to correct every misalignment. You do not need to respond to every subtle power play. Sometimes, the greatest power is knowing, and choosing when not to reveal that you know. This is where many lose control. They confront too early. They announce suspicion too quickly. They expose strategy impulsively. And in doing so, they show their hand. Strategic thinking is quiet comprehension. It is walking into a room and sensing temperature shifts. It is noticing when energy tightens. It is recognizing alliances without being told. It is detecting insecurity behind arrogance. It is seeing ambition behind friendliness. When you develop this skill, you stop being surprised. And when you stop being surprised, you stop being destabilized. Emotional overwhelm often comes from misreading situations. You thought someone supported you, they did not. You thought urgency meant importance, it did not. You thought agreement meant commitment, it did not. Clarity reduces chaos. Reading without speaking builds clarity. The calm strategist does not rush to interpret. They observe long enough for patterns to reveal themselves. And when they finally act, they act with context. Context is power. Silence is surveillance. Observation is leverage. And the person who sees clearly rarely needs to defend themselves loudly. They already positioned themselves before others realized a move was happening. Pause. In your next interaction, say less, watch more. Notice patterns. Listen to tone. Track alignment. You are not becoming suspicious. You are becoming strategic. And that changes everything. Chapter 5. Emotional control is strategic control. Most people believe emotions are obstacles to power. They think strategy requires detachment, coldness, distance. They assume that if you feel deeply, you cannot think clearly. That is not true. Emotions are not the problem. Unregulated emotion is. There is a difference. You do not lose leverage because you feel anger. You lose leverage when anger chooses your words. You do not lose power because you feel fear. You lose power when fear dictates your timing. You do not lose authority because you feel hurt. You lose authority when hurt demands immediate relief. Strategic control begins where emotional impulsiveness ends. Pause with that. Most of the decisions that weaken your position were not made in ignorance. They were made in urgency. They were made to reduce discomfort. You answered quickly to stop the anxiety. You confronted immediately to release frustration. You agreed too soon to avoid tension. You over-explained to prevent misunderstanding. But every time you act to relieve an emotion instead of to create an outcome, you surrender strategic control. Emotions are signals. They are not instructions. They are information about your internal state. They are not commands for external action. The strategic thinker separates three things that most people collapse into one: feeling, interpretation, and response. You feel something. You interpret what it means. Then you choose a response. Most people skip the middle step. They feel disrespected and immediately assume attack. They feel uncertain and assume danger. They feel overlooked and assume rejection. But interpretation is not fact. It is narrative. And strategy requires you to slow that narrative down. When you feel something intense, the first question is not "what should I do?" The first question is, what is this emotion trying to tell me? Anger may be signaling a boundary. Fear may be signaling risk. Jealousy may be signaling insecurity. Anxiety may be signaling uncertainty. These are data points. And data is useful if you do not let it drive the vehicle. Emotional restraint is not suppression. It is containment. Suppression pushes emotion down. Containment holds emotion steady while you assess. A calm mind is not empty of feeling. It is organized. And organization creates leverage. Think about negotiation. The person who appears emotionally steady holds psychological advantage. The one who flinches first reveals pressure. The one who reacts first reveals sensitivity. The one who raises their voice first reveals insecurity. Control of expression often determines control of outcome. When you regulate your tone, you regulate the temperature of the interaction. When you regulate your pace, you regulate the rhythm of the room. When you regulate your facial expression, you regulate what others can read from you. Information flows both ways in every interaction. The more emotionally reactive you are, the more information you leak. Your frustration reveals what matters to you. Your defensiveness reveals where you feel weak. Your eagerness reveals what you want too badly. The strategic mind understands this. It does not erase emotion. It disciplines its display. This is especially important for high achievers and professionals navigating politics. In competitive environments, people study reactions. They test boundaries. They introduce pressure to see who bends. If you bend visibly, you become predictable. Predictability reduces power. Emotional control, on the other hand, creates ambiguity. And ambiguity creates respect. When people cannot easily read your triggers, they move carefully around you. That is leverage. But emotional mastery is not only about how others perceive you. It is also about how you perceive situations. When your nervous system is overwhelmed, your thinking narrows. You see fewer options. You interpret neutral events as threats. You escalate small issues into large ones. Calm expands perception. When you are calm, you notice alternatives. You consider timing. You recognize that not every comment requires a correction. Not every challenge requires a confrontation. Not every opportunity requires immediate action. Calm multiplies options. And the more options you see, the more powerful you become. Emotional control is strategic control because it keeps you in choice. Choice is power. Reactivity is surrender. There will be moments when your emotions surge. This is human. This is natural. The goal is not to eliminate reaction. The goal is to extend the gap between feeling and action. Even 5 seconds can change a trajectory. 5 seconds to breathe before replying. 5 seconds to lower your tone. 5 seconds to ask a clarifying question instead of making an accusation. Those seconds are invisible to others. But they are decisive. Strategic thinkers train themselves to delay response in moments of intensity. They understand that urgency often signals emotional activation, not actual necessity. If something truly requires immediate action, clarity will still exist after you breathe. If clarity disappears when you slow down, it was never clarity. It was emotion. This is especially important for entrepreneurs and leaders. Your emotional state becomes the emotional climate of your team. If you react sharply, others contract. If you panic, others rush. If you overcorrect, others hesitate. Your regulation sets the standard. The calm leader does not rush to fix. They assess. They ask. They listen. Then they move. And because their movements are deliberate, they carry weight. Emotional control also protects long-term strategy from short-term ego. Many battles are fought not for progress, but for pride. You want to prove you were right. You want to correct someone publicly. You want acknowledgement. You want validation. But strategic thinking asks a different question. Does this advance my long-term position? If the answer is no, you release it. You do not respond to every provocation. You do not attend every argument. You do not defend against every misunderstanding. You choose based on direction, not ego. This is not weakness. It is maturity. Emotional maturity is the foundation of strategic power. Without it, intelligence becomes aggression. Ambition becomes impatience. Confidence becomes arrogance. With it, intelligence becomes precision. Ambition becomes discipline. Confidence becomes steadiness. And steadiness wins over time. There will always be people who are louder, faster, more reactive. Let them. While they exhaust themselves responding to everything, you conserve energy. While they chase emotional relief, you build positional advantage. While they react to the present, you consider the future. Emotional control does not make you passive. It makes you selective. And selectivity is the beginning of mastery. Pause here. Notice your breathing. Notice how often your decisions have been attempts to feel better instead of to become stronger. From this moment forward, you will not treat emotion as an enemy. You will treat it as information. You will slow interpretation. You will choose response. And in that space between feeling and action, you will discover something powerful. You are no longer at the mercy of your impulses. You are in command of your direction. Next, we move into the power of patience and timing, where control of emotion transforms into control of momentum. Chapter 6: The Power of Patience and Timing. Most people do not lose because they lack intelligence. They lose because they lack timing. They move too early. They speak too soon. They respond before understanding. They push before the ground is stable. And then they call it bad luck. But timing is not luck. It is perception disciplined by patience. If you have ever felt that you keep doing the right things yet still fall behind, consider this: perhaps your actions were correct, but your timing was not. A good move at the wrong time becomes a mistake. A powerful truth spoken too early becomes resistance. An opportunity taken before you are prepared becomes pressure. Strategic thinkers understand something most people overlook. The moment matters as much as the move. Patience is often misunderstood as delay, as hesitation, as fear. But patience is not passive. Patience is controlled readiness. It is the ability to wait without becoming anxious or observe without becoming restless or prepare without announcing. When others rush, they reveal information. When others panic, they expose weakness. When others feel urgency, they leak their priorities. And if you are patient enough to stay still, you see it. Urgency is rarely neutral. Urgency is often someone else's fear trying to recruit you. A deadline can be real. But emotional urgency, the feeling that something must happen immediately or everything collapses, that is often a signal worth examining, not obeying. Strategic patience begins with a simple internal question. Is this truly urgent, or does it only feel urgent? Most professionals burn out because they treat every signal as a command, every email as immediate, every disagreement as necessary to resolve now, every opportunity as scarce. But scarcity thinking collapses perspective. Patience restores perspective. It allows you to separate what demands attention from what merely demands reaction. Consider workplace politics. Someone challenges you publicly. The room shifts. You feel heat rising in your chest. The reactive mind wants to respond immediately, to defend, clarify, prove. But the strategic mind understands timing. Sometimes the strongest move is silence in the moment, followed by a private, controlled conversation later. Sometimes the strongest move is letting someone overexpose themselves. When a person speaks excessively in conflict, they often reveal more than they intend. Their tone shifts. Their logic thins. Their emotions escalate. Patience allows them to show you who they are. And information is leverage. Entrepreneurs often fail not because their ideas are weak, but because they scale too early. They hire too fast. They expand before systems are stable. They launch before refining. High achievers often sabotage themselves because they push for constant acceleration. They treat rest as weakness. They treat slow seasons as failure. But slow seasons are not failure. They are calibration. Nature does not rush growth. Seeds germinate underground before breaking surface. Roots deepen before branches expand. If growth were visible from the beginning, it would also be vulnerable. Patience builds invisible strength. Strategic timing also means knowing when to act decisively. Patience is not permanent stillness. It is the discipline of waiting until leverage is strongest. A negotiation is different when the other party needs the deal more than you do. A conversation is different when emotions have cooled. A decision is different when data has accumulated. Time changes power. Those who cannot wait are often those with the least power. And this is difficult for emotionally overwhelmed adults to accept. Because overwhelm creates urgency. When you feel behind in life, you want fast results. When you feel disrespected, you want immediate correction. When you feel uncertain, you want immediate clarity. But immediate action rarely produces long-term advantage. It only produces relief. And relief is not strategy. Strategic patience means you tolerate temporary discomfort for permanent positioning. It means you allow tension to exist without scrambling to eliminate it. In relationships, this changes everything. Not every misunderstanding requires immediate resolution. Not every mood requires interrogation. Not every silence requires filling. Sometimes clarity emerges if you allow space. Sometimes people reveal themselves if you stop pressing. Sometimes your own mind calms enough to see differently if you do not force conclusions. Thinking 3 steps ahead, which we will explore deeper soon, requires patience first. Because if you cannot pause, you cannot project. Projection requires distance from emotion. Patience creates that distance. Here is another truth. Time exposes character. If someone consistently disrespects boundaries, patience allows pattern recognition. If someone consistently fails to follow through, patience reveals reliability levels. If a strategy consistently drains more than it produces, patience gives you enough data to pivot wisely instead of emotionally. Without patience, you make decisions from fragments. With patience, you make decisions from patterns. Patterns are more trustworthy than moments. This does not mean you tolerate abuse or stagnation. It means you do not confuse temporary intensity with long-term reality. Calm patience unsettles people who rely on emotional pressure. When you do not rush, you signal confidence. When you do not chase, you signal value. When you do not react, you signal stability. And stability is magnetic. The strategic thinker understands something simple yet profound. The person who controls their pace controls their direction. You do not need to match the speed of chaos. You do not need to answer instantly to prove competence. You do not need to move quickly to prove ambition. Move when the timing strengthens you. Wait when the timing weakens you. Observe until clarity replaces urgency. And remember this. Time is not your enemy unless you treat it as one. Used well, time multiplies insight. It reveals motives. It strengthens preparation. It increases leverage. The impatient seek immediate victory. The strategist seeks durable advantage. One is loud and temporary. The other is quiet and compounding. In the next chapter, we will deepen this further. Because patience alone is not enough. You must also learn how to think ahead. Not anxiously, but deliberately. Not fearfully, but structurally. For now, reflect on this. Where in your life are you rushing because you feel pressure, not because the timing is right? Pause there. Your next advantage may not require action. It may require waiting. Chapter 7. Thinking 3 steps ahead. Most people live one move at a time. They say what feels necessary in the moment. They decide based on what feels urgent today. They respond to what is directly in front of them. And then they are surprised by consequences. They are surprised when a casual comment becomes office tension. Surprised when a rushed agreement becomes a long-term burden. Surprised when a short-term win creates a long-term weakness. But nothing is random. What feels like bad luck is often short-range thinking. Strategic thinkers operate differently. They do not live in the present moment alone. They live in the present while mentally visiting the future. They ask quietly, before speaking, before committing, before reacting. If I do this, what happens next? And after that, what happens? And then. 3 steps. Not obsessively. Not anxiously. But deliberately. Thinking 3 steps ahead is not paranoia. It is perspective. When someone challenges you publicly, the first move is obvious, respond. But the second move matters more. How will your response shift the room? And the third move matters most. What precedent are you setting for how people treat you in the future? Most people think about the first move only. Strategic thinkers think about positioning. Consider workplace politics. If you confront someone immediately, you may feel relief. That is the first move. But what does that confrontation do to alliances? That is the second move. And how does it affect your reputation as calm or reactive? That is the third. Short-term relief often costs long-term leverage. This is why emotional control remains foundational. Without it, you cannot see past the immediate. Emotions compress time. They make now feel enormous. They make consequences feel distant. Strategic thinking expands time. It stretches your awareness forward. You begin to see that every action creates a chain reaction. A message sent in frustration might solve a feeling today but create distance tomorrow. A rushed partnership might generate quick revenue but bind you to misaligned values. A public correction might defend your ego but weaken your influence. 3 steps ahead. Not because you fear outcomes, but because you understand cause and effect. This applies to entrepreneurs. When you lower your price to win a client, the first step is revenue. The second step is expectation. They will expect discounts again. The third step is positioning. You become known for affordability, not authority. Was the first step worth the third? This applies to relationships. When you tolerate disrespect to avoid conflict, the first step is peace. The second step is normalization. The third step is erosion of self-respect. Peace at what cost? Strategic thinking forces you to evaluate cost before commitment. It shifts your internal question from, how do I win this moment, to how does this move shape my future? High achievers often struggle here. They are decisive, capable, fast. But speed without projection becomes self-sabotage. Thinking ahead does not mean delaying forever. It means simulating outcomes before acting. You do not need perfect prediction. You need directional awareness. Ask yourself, calmly, if this goes well, what happens next? If this goes poorly, what happens next? Who benefits? Who loses? What habits am I reinforcing? Strategic thinkers understand that behavior compounds. One impulsive reaction is not isolated. It builds identity. One poorly set boundary is not temporary. It trains others how to engage you. One rushed decision does not disappear. It anchors future options. You are always building a pattern. And patterns are more powerful than moments. This is why chess is often used as a metaphor for strategy. Not because life is a game, but because strong players do not stare at one piece. They see the board. They understand that moving a single piece alters the entire structure. And sometimes the strongest move is restraint, not because there is no move available, but because the timing is not yet aligned. 3 steps ahead also protects you from manipulation. When someone pressures you for an immediate answer, pause internally. Why must this be decided now? Who benefits from urgency? What happens if I wait? Urgency is often a tactic. Time reveals truth. If a proposal collapses because you asked for space to think, it was never stable. If a person grows defensive when you ask clarifying questions, their intentions were fragile. Strategic projection uncovers weakness, in plans and in people. But it also uncovers opportunity. When you think ahead, you begin preparing before others even notice the need. You build skills before the market demands them. You strengthen relationships before crisis requires support. You save resources before downturns arrive. You become less reactive because you are less surprised. And calm anticipation replaces frantic recovery. This does not mean you control everything. It means you reduce preventable damage. You stop stepping into traps created by short-term thinking. You begin acting from long-range clarity. This chapter is not about becoming calculating. It is about becoming intentional. Before your next decision, practice this. Pause. Visualize the immediate result. Then visualize the ripple. Then visualize the pattern it reinforces. Does this move strengthen your position? Or does it soothe your discomfort? Strategic thinking requires honesty. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. You are not standing up for yourself. You are venting. You are not seizing opportunity. You are avoiding patience. You are not being decisive. You are escaping uncertainty. 3 steps ahead exposes your motives. And that awareness gives you power. Because when you see clearly, you choose differently. Over time, something remarkable happens. While others manage damage, you manage direction. While others respond to consequences, you anticipate them. While others explain mistakes, you quietly avoid them. This is not luck. It is projection. It is discipline. It is maturity applied to decision-making. Strategic thinkers are not fortune tellers. They are pattern readers. They understand that actions are seeds. And seeds grow, whether you intended the harvest or not. So before you plant your next decision, look ahead. 3 steps. Not with fear. With clarity. Because the person who sees further does not move faster. They move wiser. And wisdom, applied consistently, keeps you ahead, quietly. Chapter 8. When silence speaks louder than words. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. They rush to fill it. They explain too much. They justify. They defend. They overclarify. Silence feels like vulnerability to them. It feels like weakness. It feels like losing control of the room. But strategic thinkers understand something most people never learn. Silence is not emptiness. It is positioning. When you speak, you reveal information. You reveal your thoughts, your emotional state, your priorities, your insecurities. You show your timing. You show your level of urgency. Words are commitments. Once spoken, they cannot be retrieved. They shape perception. They set expectations. Silence, on the other hand, gathers information. When you stop speaking, others begin to fill the space. They elaborate. They reveal. They overextend. And in that extension, truth surfaces. Think about a negotiation. If someone proposes terms and you immediately counter, you reveal your range. If you defend your value quickly, you signal insecurity. If you rush to agree, you signal need. But if you pause, calmly, steadily, the dynamic shifts. The other person begins wondering. Did they ask for too much? Are you considering alternatives? Are they underestimating you? Silence creates psychological movement in others. It forces reflection. It increases perceived confidence. Because calm stillness communicates control. When you are not scrambling to respond, you signal that you are not pressured. And pressure is power's enemy. This applies in conflict. When someone criticizes you unfairly, the instinct is to defend, to explain, to correct, to push back. But strategic silence interrupts escalation. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. You observe tone. You observe intention. You observe whether the criticism is meant to improve or provoke. Sometimes the most powerful response is a measured, minimal one. Sometimes it is no response at all. Because not every attack deserves energy. Not every comment requires correction. When you respond to everything, you train people to engage you carelessly. When you respond selectively, you elevate your threshold. Silence also strengthens authority. Notice the difference between someone who speaks constantly and someone who speaks deliberately. The constant speaker becomes predictable. Their words lose weight. Their opinions feel abundant. But the deliberate speaker, the one who pauses, who listens, who speaks only when necessary, commands attention. Their words carry gravity because they are rare. Scarcity creates value. This is not about withdrawal. It is about intentional communication. When you speak less, you think more. When you think more, you choose better. In professional environments, silence can protect you. When gossip begins, silence protects your neutrality. When tension rises in meetings, silence allows you to read alliances. When a proposal feels unclear, silence gives you space to assess hidden variables. The emotionally overwhelmed person often speaks to relieve anxiety. They talk to stabilize themselves. They over-explain to feel understood. They argue to feel secure. But relief is not strategy. Calm restraint is. Silence regulates your nervous system. It forces you to slow your breath. It forces you to process internally. It prevents impulsive damage. And over time, something shifts. You begin to feel less compelled to prove yourself. You do not need to announce your intelligence. You do not need to defend your competence constantly. You do not need to correct every misconception immediately. You understand that perception evolves over time, not through force, but through consistency. Silence also reveals character. When you withhold immediate reaction, you see how others behave without your participation. Do they escalate? Do they self-correct? Do they reveal insecurity? Do they become defensive? Without your interference, patterns become visible. And visibility is strategic advantage. This is especially important for leaders and entrepreneurs. If you speak first in every meeting, you anchor the direction. Sometimes that is necessary. But sometimes withholding your opinion reveals who can think independently. When you allow others to speak first, you collect unfiltered data. You see confidence levels. You see alignment. You see hidden resistance. Silence becomes diagnostic. It gathers intelligence without confrontation. However, silence must be grounded, not passive-aggressive. Strategic silence is calm. It is composed. It is intentional. It is not punishment. It is not avoidance. It is not emotional shutdown. There is a difference between silence rooted in fear and silence rooted in control. Fearful silence shrinks. Strategic silence steadies. When you choose not to respond immediately, ask yourself, am I pausing to understand? Or am I retreating to avoid discomfort? Strategic thinkers do not hide from reality. They delay response to improve clarity. This practice will feel uncomfortable at first. You will feel the urge to fill space, to clarify, to soften tension. But hold. Count internally if necessary. Breathe slowly. Let the other person finish fully. Observe what happens when you do not rush to resolve. Often, people reveal more than they intended. Often, they adjust their tone when faced with calm steadiness. Often, they reconsider when their words echo in silence. And sometimes, silence simply protects your dignity. Not every conversation deserves your full energy. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Not every provocation requires participation. Strategic thinkers understand restraint. They understand that power is not demonstrated by volume. It is demonstrated by control. When you control your speech, you control your positioning. When you control your positioning, you influence perception. And perception, over time, shapes opportunity. Silence is not the absence of power. It is disciplined power. It is knowing that you do not have to react to every stimulus. It is trusting that measured words carry more weight than emotional ones. It is understanding that calm presence unsettles chaos. In a world addicted to noise, stillness stands out. Not loudly, but unmistakably. And when you finally choose to speak, after observing, after assessing, after thinking 3 steps ahead, your words land differently. They land with precision. They land with authority. They land because they were not rushed. Silence is not weakness. It is strategy in its purest form. Learn to hold it. Learn to use it. And watch how the room shifts, without you raising your voice at all. Chapter 9. Avoiding Unnecessary Battles. Not every disagreement deserves your energy. Not every challenge requires your response. Not every attack demands retaliation. But most people live as if it does. They treat every contradiction as a threat. Every criticism as disrespect. Every difference in opinion as a contest. And slowly, without realizing it, they exhaust themselves. Strategic thinking requires a difficult discipline. You must learn to distinguish between what feels personal and what is actually consequential. There is a difference. When someone questions you publicly, your ego feels activated. When someone underestimates you, pride tightens. When someone speaks carelessly, irritation rises. But ask yourself calmly, does this threaten my long-term position? Or does it only threaten my immediate comfort? Many battles are emotional, not strategic. And emotional battles rarely produce strategic outcomes. The calm strategist understands something most people ignore. Energy is finite. Reputation is cumulative. Attention is currency. Every confrontation costs something. It costs focus. It costs time. It costs emotional stability. It costs perception. And sometimes, the cost is far greater than the issue itself. Consider workplace politics. Someone makes a subtle comment to undermine you. You could respond immediately, defend, clarify, expose. But what happens next? You validate the tension publicly. You create visible friction. You shift attention from your work to the conflict. Was the comment strong enough to require that cost? Strategic withdrawal is not weakness. It is cost-benefit awareness. There are battles you win by silence. There are conflicts that dissolve when not fed. There are individuals who lose influence when denied reaction. Not every opponent deserves your engagement. Some people want reaction, not resolution. And when you react, you reward the behavior. This is especially true for emotionally overwhelmed adults. When you are already tired, stretched, mentally burdened, every small conflict feels larger than it is. Your nervous system amplifies it. But strategic thinking requires regulation first. Pause. Breathe. Evaluate the scale of the issue against the scale of your long-term goals. If the confrontation does not advance your direction, it is likely a distraction. Entrepreneurs often learn this the hard way. A negative comment appears online. A competitor makes a subtle jab. A client expresses dissatisfaction harshly. The impulse is to defend publicly. But what serves you more? Arguing with one critic? Or continuing to build so consistently that criticism becomes irrelevant? Strategic thinkers protect their momentum. They do not trade long-term growth for short-term validation. This applies in relationships as well. Sometimes you can win the argument and lose the relationship. Sometimes you can prove your point and damage trust. Sometimes you can respond sharply and confirm someone's belief that you are reactive. Winning is not always about being correct. It is about preserving leverage. Ask yourself, if I respond, what do I gain? If I remain silent, what do I preserve? The calm strategist does not avoid all conflict. They choose conflict carefully. There are battles that must be fought. When values are violated. When boundaries are ignored repeatedly. When silence would create long-term disadvantage. But even then, the approach is measured. No dramatic escalation. No emotional flooding. No public spectacle. Precision. Direct. Calm. Controlled. Because the goal is resolution, not emotional release. High achievers often struggle with this. They are accustomed to performance, to proving, to demonstrating competence. So when challenged, they instinctively defend. But constant defense signals insecurity. Quiet consistency signals authority. If you are always clarifying yourself, you weaken your position. If you are always correcting others publicly, you appear unstable. Strategic thinkers understand optics. They understand that composure communicates more than argument. Avoiding unnecessary battles also protects your internal state. Every conflict activates stress chemistry. Cortisol, adrenaline, mental rumination. Your brain remains preoccupied long after the exchange ends. Was that worth it? If the conflict does not move your life forward, it is a tax. And taxes accumulate. Over time, people who fight everything lose clarity. They become defensive by default. They anticipate attack even when none exists. This is not strength. It is hypervigilance. Strategic calm means you do not engage simply because you can. You engage because it serves your direction. This requires ego maturity. Sometimes the smartest move is letting someone believe they won. Let them have the last word. Let them feel superior. Time exposes performance. Consistency exposes substance. And when your results speak, arguments fade. Underestimation can be an advantage. When people think you are passive, they reveal themselves more freely. When they assume you are unaware, they expose their strategy. When they dismiss you, they relax. And relaxed opponents make mistakes. But you must be secure enough to tolerate temporary misunderstanding. If you constantly need recognition, you will constantly enter unnecessary battles. Strategic thinkers are comfortable being misunderstood temporarily, because they are building something longer term. This does not mean suppressing yourself. It means choosing when expression creates advantage and when it creates noise. There is a quiet confidence in walking away from small conflicts. It signals stability. It signals control. It signals perspective. And perspective is rare. Before your next confrontation, ask, will this matter in 6 months? Will this strengthen my position? Will this preserve or drain my energy? If the answer is no, step back. Not out of fear. Out of discipline. The calm strategist is not passive. They are selective. And selectivity is power. Because when you stop fighting everything, you become formidable when you finally choose to fight. Your words carry more weight. Your boundaries feel serious. Your presence commands attention. Not because you are loud, but because you are measured. And measured people are dangerous in the best way. They do not waste motion. They do not waste emotion. They do not waste battles. They conserve strength for what truly matters. And over time, this restraint compounds. While others are exhausted from constant conflict, you remain steady. While others are distracted by drama, you build. While others are reacting, you are advancing. Quietly. Deliberately. Strategically. Winning does not always mean confrontation. Sometimes winning means preservation. Sometimes winning means patience. Sometimes winning means walking away untouched. The mature strategist understands. The fewer unnecessary battles you fight, the stronger you are when it truly counts. Chapter 10. The Art of Influence Without Force. Most people misunderstand influence. They believe influence is volume. They believe it is dominance. They believe it is persuasion through pressure. They think the person who talks the most controls the direction. But force creates resistance. And resistance, even when silent, always returns later. True influence does not feel like control. It feels like alignment. Strategic thinkers understand something subtle. The strongest position is not pushing people. It is shaping the environment in which decisions are made. There is a difference. Force says, do this. Influence asks, what would make this the obvious choice? One creates tension. The other creates momentum. When you try to force outcomes, you reveal insecurity. When you guide outcomes quietly, you reveal authority. Influence without force begins with positioning. Positioning is how you frame yourself before you speak. It is how consistently you show up. It is the reputation you build in silence. If you are known as reactive, your suggestions will feel emotional. If you are known as calm, your suggestions will feel considered. Reputation amplifies influence. This is why emotional mastery matters long before negotiation begins. Consider workplace dynamics. Two professionals offer the same idea. One speaks quickly, defends aggressively, and interrupts objections. The other speaks calmly, pauses after key points, and allows silence to work. The room responds differently. Not because the ideas differ, but because perceived stability influences trust. Influence is often a function of perceived control. And perceived control begins with self-control. There is another principle most people overlook. People support what they feel part of. Force excludes participation. Influence invites it. Instead of saying, this is what we're doing, a strategic thinker asks, what concerns do you see? Or what would make this stronger? These are not weak questions. They are tactical. When people express concerns, they reveal their priorities. When they offer improvements, they invest ownership. Now the decision is no longer yours alone. It is shared. And shared decisions face less resistance. Influence without force also requires patience. If someone disagrees with you, immediate correction is rarely necessary. Let them speak. Often, people convince themselves when they feel heard. Silence after someone finishes speaking can be powerful. Not silence as intimidation. Silence as space. Space allows reflection. Reflection reduces defensiveness. Most arguments escalate because both sides rush to fill silence. Strategic thinkers allow silence to do the heavy lifting. Another subtle element of influence is framing. Framing is how options are presented. For example, you can say, we need to cut costs. Or you can say, we have an opportunity to increase efficiency and protect long-term growth. The second frame aligns with identity, growth, protection, intelligence. Humans do not respond to logic alone. They respond to meaning. Influence without force requires understanding what matters to the other person. What do they fear? What do they value? What do they protect? When your proposal aligns with their internal priorities, it feels natural. This is not manipulation. Manipulation hides intention for selfish gain. Strategic influence clarifies intention and aligns benefit. There is integrity in that. Entrepreneurs must understand this deeply. If you attempt to pressure a client into buying, they may comply once. But if you position your service as the natural solution to a clearly articulated problem, you do not need pressure. Clarity replaces coercion. In relationships, force creates emotional distance. Statements like, you always, or you need to, activate defense. But I've noticed, or help me understand, invites dialogue. Influence without force is not about softness. It is about precision. It requires restraint. It requires observing the emotional temperature of the room before inserting your energy. It requires adjusting your tone to the situation instead of imposing it. This is maturity. And maturity is persuasive. Another dimension of influence is timing. Even the best idea delivered at the wrong moment fails. If someone is stressed, distracted, or threatened, their cognitive bandwidth is limited. Strategic thinkers wait. They choose moments of openness. They understand that receptivity is as important as content. This is why patience remains central to strategic power. Influence also depends on consistency. One calm response means little. 10 calm responses build identity. One thoughtful decision builds curiosity. Repeated thoughtful decisions build authority. Authority built slowly requires no force. People begin to defer naturally. And here is a deeper truth. The less you chase influence, the more you possess it. Desperation weakens positioning. When you need others to agree with you to feel secure, you will over-explain. You will over-defend. You will overcommit. Calm confidence allows brevity. A strategic thinker can say less because their history speaks. Influence without force is the art of alignment. Alignment between your internal regulation and your external communication. Alignment between your goals and others' interests. Alignment between timing and message. When alignment exists, persuasion feels unnecessary. Direction unfolds organically. This approach also protects your energy. Force is exhausting. You must constantly monitor resistance. Constantly defend position. Constantly escalate. Influence built on stability requires less effort. It compounds. Over time, people anticipate your reasoning. They consider your perspective before you speak. They assume thoughtfulness. This is quiet power. It does not demand attention. It attracts it. Before you attempt to influence any situation, ask yourself, am I trying to control, or am I trying to align? If control is your goal, resistance will follow. If alignment is your goal, cooperation becomes possible. Strategic thinking is not about overpowering others. It is about structuring conditions where the desired outcome becomes the most logical path forward. That requires patience, observation, emotional restraint, clarity of intention, and most importantly, self-security. Because only someone secure does not need to force. Influence without force is a reflection of internal stability. When you are steady, your words carry weight. When you are calm, your silence carries presence. When you are deliberate, your suggestions carry direction. You do not push. You position. And position correctly, you rarely need to push at all. Chapter 11. Using setbacks as strategic feedback. Most people experience setbacks as verdicts. A failed launch becomes proof they are not capable. A rejected proposal becomes proof they are not respected. A lost opportunity becomes proof they are behind. They personalize what should have been analyzed. And in doing so, they miss the most valuable part of failure. Data. Strategic thinkers do not experience loss as identity damage. They experience it as information. This does not mean they feel nothing. Disappointment is natural. Frustration is human. But they do not collapse into emotion. They extract instruction from it. There is a difference between pain and interpretation. Pain says, this did not work. Interpretation says, I am not good enough. Pain is temporary. Interpretation becomes identity. If you want to think strategically, you must learn to separate outcome from self. When something fails, the untrained mind asks, why does this always happen to me? The strategic mind asks, what did this reveal? What assumptions were incorrect? What signals were ignored? What timing was off? What leverage was missing? This is not self-criticism. It is pattern correction. Consider professionals navigating workplace politics. You expected recognition. It did not come. The instinct is resentment. But resentment offers no leverage. Strategic feedback asks, did I communicate value clearly? Did I build alliances? Did I assume visibility equals influence? A setback is rarely random. It usually exposes a blind spot. Entrepreneurs understand this well, at least in theory. A product fails. The market does not respond. The campaign underperforms. The emotional reaction is embarrassment, doubt, impulse to pivot recklessly. But the strategic response is quieter. Was the positioning aligned with audience needs? Was the messaging clear? Was the offer compelling, or merely urgent? Failure narrows ambiguity. It shows you exactly where friction exists, but only if you are regulated enough to examine it. High achievers often struggle here. They are used to competence, used to being ahead, used to succeeding through effort. So when something does not work, it destabilizes their self-image. They either overcorrect aggressively or withdraw completely. Neither response is strategic. Strategic feedback requires composure. It requires sitting with discomfort long enough to ask better questions. Not why did I lose? But where was I exposed? Exposure is not humiliation. It is clarity. Maybe you relied too heavily on talent and not enough on preparation. Maybe you trusted too quickly. Maybe you underestimated resistance. Maybe you moved too early. Setbacks refine awareness. They show you the cost of miscalculation. And that cost, if analyzed correctly, becomes tuition, not trauma. Think about this carefully. The only people who never fail are the ones who never attempt positioning. And stagnation is not safety. It is slow decline. Strategic thinkers understand that losses are part of trajectory, but they do not romanticize them. They study them. They do not say, everything happens for a reason. They say, there is a reason this happened. Find it. That shift in language matters, because it moves you from passive acceptance to active refinement. There is also another layer. Sometimes the setback is not about skill. It is about misalignment. You pursued something that did not fit your strengths. You entered a space where your values clashed with the culture. You attempted to gain approval from people whose incentives were never aligned with yours. Strategic thinking is not only about correcting mistakes. It is about recalibrating direction. Not every loss means improved performance. Some losses mean change environment. If you consistently find yourself fighting uphill battles, ask, is this terrain worth conquering? Because strategy includes choosing where to compete. And sometimes the smartest move is relocation, not retaliation. Setbacks also expose emotional triggers. Did criticism destabilize you more than it should? Did rejection activate urgency? Did delay create panic? These reactions are not weaknesses. They are indicators. They show you where emotional regulation still needs reinforcement. Remember this. Anyone can act strategically when winning. True strategic maturity reveals itself after loss. Can you remain composed? Can you resist the urge to prove yourself immediately? Can you avoid announcing comeback plans before you have rebuilt leverage? Revenge is reactive. Refinement is strategic. You do not need to make noise after a setback. You need to make adjustments. Quietly. The world often sees only the visible result, the promotion, the growth, the stability. It rarely sees the recalibration process, the nights of reflection, the patterns examined, the behaviors corrected. But this invisible work is what prevents repetition. Because unexamined setbacks become cycles. You date the same personality in different bodies. You enter the same business model under different branding. You react the same way to authority, again and again. Not because you are unlucky, but because you did not extract the lesson. Strategic thinkers do not waste pain. They convert it. They turn embarrassment into awareness. They turn rejection into positioning clarity. They turn delay into preparation time. And most importantly, they do not let one outcome define their capacity. A failed move does not mean you are incapable. It means the calculation needs refinement. There is strength in this mindset. It removes shame. It replaces ego defense with curiosity. When you approach setbacks as feedback, you reduce fear. Because even if something fails, it is not empty. It is instructional. Over time, this approach creates resilience that is calm, not aggressive. You stop fearing mistakes. You start managing them. You move with confidence not because you are certain of success, but because you trust your ability to adjust. That trust is powerful. It keeps you steady while others spiral. It keeps you learning while others blame. It keeps you advancing while others retreat. The question is not whether you will face setbacks. You will. The question is whether you will personalize them or analyze them. One path weakens identity. The other strengthens strategy. Pause. Think about your most recent disappointment. Not emotionally. Strategically. What did it reveal about timing? About preparation? About positioning? About yourself? There is insight there. And insight, when applied, keeps you ahead. Not because you never fall, but because you never fall without learning where the ground shifted. That is strategic maturity. And it turns every setback into silent progress. Chapter 12. Strategic Thinking in Daily Life. Strategic thinking is not reserved for boardrooms. It is not only for executives negotiating contracts, or entrepreneurs navigating competition, or leaders managing power. If it lives only in high-stakes moments, it is not yet integrated. True strategy shows itself in ordinary days. In how you respond to a dismissive comment. In how you structure your morning. In how you manage your energy after a difficult conversation. In how you choose what deserves your attention, and what does not. Daily life is where positioning compounds. Many emotionally overwhelmed adults believe their stress comes from complexity. Too many responsibilities. Too many expectations. Too many demands. But often, the exhaustion comes from unfiltered engagement. Responding to everything. Entering every debate. Explaining yourself unnecessarily. Saying yes before evaluating cost. Strategic thinking in daily life begins with a quiet filter. Does this require my full engagement? Not every invitation deserves acceptance. Not every message deserves an immediate reply. Not every opinion deserves correction. Professionals navigating workplace politics often make one critical mistake. They confuse visibility with advancement. They speak in every meeting, volunteer for every project, defend every point, prove their intelligence repeatedly. But strategy asks a different question. What builds influence over time? Sometimes it is not speaking more. It is speaking at the right moment. Sometimes it is not accepting every task. It is choosing the ones that increase positioning. Daily strategy is about selective investment. Your attention is currency. Your energy is leverage. Your time is structure. If you spend them impulsively, you weaken your long-term position. If you allocate them deliberately, you strengthen it. Entrepreneurs feel this intensely. Every opportunity looks urgent. Every idea feels promising. Every request seems important. But strategic thinking asks, does this align with direction? Short-term revenue can dilute long-term brand. Quick expansion can fracture operational stability. Immediate validation can distract from meaningful growth. Direction over stimulation. That is daily strategy. High achievers battling burnout often believe the solution is doing less. But often, the solution is doing less of the wrong things. You are not overwhelmed because you are incapable. You are overwhelmed because you are unfiltered. Strategy reduces friction by clarifying priorities. Instead of asking, what must I do today? Ask, what advances my position? Advancement is not busyness. It is alignment. In relationships, strategic thinking becomes emotional maturity. When someone reacts emotionally, most people mirror it. Tone rises. Defensiveness increases. Conflict escalates. But strategic presence asks, what outcome do I want here? If the outcome is resolution, escalation is not useful. If the outcome is clarity, accusation is not helpful. You can disagree without destabilizing the dynamic. You can set boundaries without aggression. You can withdraw without drama. Strategy in relationships is not manipulation. It is outcome awareness. Instead of winning the argument, you aim to strengthen the structure. Instead of proving a point, you protect long-term respect. Emotionally overwhelmed adults often feel pulled in multiple directions because they lack internal hierarchy. Everything feels urgent because nothing is categorized. Strategic thinking introduces internal order. Some matters are immediate. Some are important but not urgent. Some are neither. The inability to differentiate creates chaos. The ability to categorize creates calm. Daily life also tests your reaction to inconvenience. Traffic. Delays. Unmet expectations. Unreturned messages. Reactive minds personalize friction. Strategic minds contextualize it. Not everything is an attack. Not everything is intentional. Not everything requires correction. Sometimes, the strongest move is ignoring minor disruptions. You protect your mental clarity by refusing to magnify small disturbances. This is how calm authority develops. You are not easily moved. Not because you are detached from reality, but because you evaluate impact before engagement. Strategic thinking also reshapes how you handle criticism. Immediate defense may protect ego, but curiosity protects growth. Ask quietly, is there useful information here? If yes, extract it. If no, discard it. Do not carry what does not serve you. In personal growth, strategy replaces random effort. Instead of consuming endless content, you choose targeted development. Instead of chasing motivation, you build structure. Instead of reacting to every new idea, you refine a core direction. Consistency becomes your quiet advantage. Strategic daily living also requires pacing. You do not need to solve everything today. You need to move one step that compounds. One conversation handled calmly. One boundary reinforced quietly. One decision aligned with long-term direction. Small strategic moves build stability. Over time, others notice something different about you. You are not rushed. You are not easily provoked. You are not constantly explaining yourself. You appear grounded. But what they are sensing is intentionality. Strategic thinking in daily life is invisible discipline. No dramatic gestures, no public declarations. Just consistent calibration. You pause before committing. You evaluate before reacting. You consider long-term impact before short-term relief. And gradually, your environment responds differently. People approach you with more respect. Conversations feel less chaotic. Decisions feel less heavy. Because clarity reduces noise. You stop leaking energy into situations that do not move your life forward. You stop allowing emotion to dictate engagement. You stop mistaking activity for advancement. Daily strategy is not about becoming rigid. It is about becoming precise. Precision removes waste. Waste of time. Waste of words. Waste of emotional bandwidth. When you live this way, life feels less overwhelming. Not because responsibilities disappear, but because you are no longer reacting to everything equally. You are selecting your engagements with care. And that is power. Quiet power. Applied not occasionally, but daily. Strategic thinking, when integrated into ordinary moments, becomes identity. You are no longer someone trying to stay ahead. You are someone who naturally does. Not loudly. Not aggressively. But consistently. And consistency, applied calmly, reshapes everything. Chapter 13. Staying invisible while advancing. There is a quiet truth most ambitious people struggle to accept. Not all progress needs an audience. In fact, the more visible your ambition becomes, the more resistance you attract. Attention is not neutral. It creates expectation. It creates comparison. It creates silent competition. And sometimes, it creates opposition before you are ready to defend your position. Strategic thinkers understand something that reactive achievers often miss. Growth is strongest in private. Most people announce too early. They share plans before they are stable. They speak goals before they are disciplined. They reveal strategies before they are protected. And when momentum slows, as it naturally does, they feel exposed. Visibility creates pressure. Pressure distorts performance. But invisibility creates leverage. When you move quietly, you are underestimated. When you are underestimated, you are unguarded. When you are unguarded, you can build without interference. Staying invisible does not mean shrinking. It means separating progress from performance. There is a difference between building and broadcasting. Professionals navigating workplace politics must understand this deeply. If you signal every ambition, you activate silent observers. If you hint at every advancement, you trigger insecurity in others. If you constantly display capability, you invite challenge before authority is secured. But when you quietly improve your skills, when you quietly build alliances, when you quietly document your results, you create stability before recognition arrives. Recognition then becomes a consequence, not a goal. Entrepreneurs struggle with this. In a culture obsessed with branding and exposure, silence feels like invisibility. And invisibility feels like irrelevance. But strategic invisibility is not absence. It is preparation. Before expansion, there must be structure. Before scaling, there must be systems. Before visibility, there must be resilience. Otherwise, attention magnifies weakness. High achievers battling burnout often expose themselves too early. They say yes to panels, interviews, projects, collaborations, not because they are ready, but because visibility feels like progress. But progress without capacity creates collapse. Staying invisible while advancing means protecting your energy. It means understanding that not every room deserves access to your growth. Some environments are not supportive. They are observant. Some people are not allies. They are evaluators. Strategic thinkers choose who sees them in development. There is also psychological power in being underestimated. When people think they understand your limits, they stop guarding against your expansion. When people believe you are stable but unthreatening, they lower resistance. Underestimation is not an insult. It is camouflage. But camouflage only works if your ego does not demand recognition. This is where emotional mastery becomes essential. Can you improve without applause? Can you refine without validation? Can you grow without announcing? If your confidence depends on visibility, invisibility will feel unbearable. But if your confidence comes from internal stability, invisibility becomes strategic shelter. In relationships, this matters too. Not every personal development shift needs explanation. When you begin setting boundaries, you do not need to declare transformation. When you begin strengthening discipline, you do not need to narrate it. When you begin detaching from unhealthy patterns, you do not need to announce departure. Quiet change is often more powerful than declared change. Because declared change invites resistance. Quiet change forces adjustment. Staying invisible also protects you from premature confrontation. If you are preparing for a leadership role, prepare first. Develop skill. Observe dynamics. Understand power structures. Strengthen competence. Then step forward when your position is fortified. Too many people try to occupy authority before they can sustain it. Strategic thinkers build foundation before claiming space. Invisibility gives you time. Time to study. Time to practice. Time to make mistakes privately. Time to correct weaknesses before they are public. Public mistakes are expensive. Private mistakes are tuition. You do not need to be known while learning. You need to be solid when seen. This principle also applies internally. You do not need to prove your growth to yourself every day. Some progress will feel slow. Some advancement will be invisible even to you. But quiet consistency compounds. Think of roots. They grow underground before the tree rises. No one applauds roots. But without them, height is unstable. Strategic invisibility is root work. It is strengthening what cannot yet be displayed. It is refusing to rush exposure for the sake of validation. It is choosing long-term credibility over short-term attention. There will be moments when silence feels uncomfortable. When others are announcing promotions. When competitors are posting achievements. When peers are broadcasting milestones. And you are building quietly. This is where discipline matters. Comparison is emotional noise. Strategy requires focus. Your timeline does not need witnesses. It needs alignment. Staying invisible while advancing also reduces emotional interference. The more opinions you invite, the more doubt you must filter. The more you explain your vision, the more you defend it. When you build privately, you protect clarity. You do not absorb unnecessary skepticism. You do not internalize external anxiety. You do not dilute direction. You refine. Then when you finally step forward, it appears sudden. To others. But not to you. To you, it was patient. Deliberate. Constructed. This is how quiet advancement works. It is not secrecy for manipulation. It is privacy for protection. It is maturity over ego. You are not hiding because you are unsure. You are withholding because you understand timing. And when the time comes, your preparation will speak without explanation. There is strength in restraint. There is power in unseen effort. There is advantage in underestimation. The goal is not to remain invisible forever. The goal is to emerge ready. And when you do, your presence will not need noise. It will carry weight. Because you did not build in public excitement. You built in private discipline. And that kind of growth cannot be shaken by attention. It can only be revealed quietly. Chapter 14, The Long Game Mindset. Most people want results. Strategic thinkers want positioning. There is a difference. Results are immediate, visible, measurable, applauded. Positioning is slow, invisible, quiet, often misunderstood. The world rewards speed, but life rewards endurance. And if you do not understand this distinction, you will spend your energy chasing moments instead of building momentum. The long game mindset begins with a simple shift. Stop asking, how do I win now? Start asking, where do I want to be in 5 years? Because short-term thinking is emotional, long-term thinking is structural. When you operate from urgency, you are pulled by pressure. When you operate from the long game, you are guided by direction. Many emotionally overwhelmed adults are not exhausted because they lack strength. They are exhausted because they are living in constant short-term reaction. Every email feels urgent. Every conflict feels decisive. Every opportunity feels once in a lifetime. Every mistake feels catastrophic. This is not strategy. This is nervous system overload. The long game mindset regulates time. It stretches your perspective beyond the intensity of the moment. And something powerful happens when you extend your timeline. You become harder to destabilize. When you know where you are going, temporary setbacks do not derail you. They become data points. When you think long-term, criticism loses its sting. You are not building for applause today. You are building for alignment over years. When you think long-term, you stop competing with peers. You compete with your own previous patterns. The long game mindset is built on delayed gratification, but not in the superficial sense of wait for rewards. It is deeper than that. It is the discipline to choose what strengthens your future self over what comforts your current self. Comfort is immediate. Growth is compounding. If you avoid difficult conversations now, you protect comfort. If you address them calmly and strategically, you protect long-term respect. If you cut corners for quick recognition, you protect ego. If you refine your craft quietly, you protect credibility. Compounding decisions matter. Small disciplines repeated over years outweigh dramatic gestures repeated occasionally. Professionals navigating workplace politics often get trapped in short-term optics. They defend every comment. They correct every perception. They react to every slight. But the long-game strategist asks, will this matter in a year? Will this alter my long-term trajectory? Or is this temporary noise? Not every battle deserves engagement. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Time clarifies what emotion exaggerates. Entrepreneurs especially must understand this. A business built on trends collapses with trends. A business built on principle endures. You may grow slower, but you grow sturdier. And slow growth with stability outperforms fast growth with fragility. High achievers battling burnout often suffer from compressed timelines. They believe they must achieve everything now. Prove everything now. Secure everything now. But urgency is not ambition. It is anxiety disguised as productivity. The long game mindset reduces internal pressure. You stop sprinting through life. You begin pacing yourself strategically. Because endurance is a skill. And endurance requires sustainability. Ask yourself honestly, are you building something that can last? Or are you performing for immediate validation? The long game strategist invests in identity, not image. Identity compounds. Image fluctuates. This applies deeply to relationships. You cannot force trust. You cannot rush loyalty. You cannot manufacture depth. These are built slowly, through consistent behavior. If you are constantly trying to win arguments, you may lose connection. If you are constantly trying to prove value, you may undermine presence. The long game mindset understands that respect earned slowly is more durable than admiration gained quickly. It also protects you from despair. When you expect transformation to happen overnight, you quit easily. When you expect progress to be gradual, you persist calmly. Strategic endurance means you measure progress in direction, not speed. You ask, am I moving closer to who I want to become? Even if slowly? If yes, you continue. The long game requires emotional regulation. Because you will be misunderstood at times, overlooked at times, undervalued at times. And if your identity depends on immediate recognition, you will abandon your path. But if your identity is anchored in long-term vision, you remain steady. There is power in being underestimated. There is power in being patient. There is power in letting others burn out while you build quietly. Time is the ultimate filter. It exposes weak foundations. It rewards disciplined consistency. It magnifies compounded effort. Strategic thinkers do not fear time. They use it. They understand that small daily improvements in emotional control, decision-making, and positioning create exponential impact over years. One calm response repeated consistently becomes reputation. One disciplined boundary maintained consistently becomes respect. One thoughtful decision repeated consistently becomes authority. You do not need dramatic reinvention. You need consistent refinement. The long-game mindset also changes how you handle setbacks. A failed project is not identity collapse. It is a chapter in a longer story. A missed opportunity is not final loss. It is information for recalibration. You detach from momentary outcomes because your focus extends beyond them. This is not passive. It is strategic patience combined with persistent effort. There will be seasons where growth feels invisible, where results lag behind effort, where recognition does not match contribution. The short-term thinker quits here. The long-term strategist continues. Because they understand something most people forget. Momentum is invisible before it is undeniable. Quiet effort compounds beneath the surface. And when it surfaces, it appears sudden to others. But it was never sudden. It was sustained. If you adopt the long-game mindset, you become difficult to defeat. Not because you never fall, but because you do not stop. You adapt. You refine. You continue. Calmly. Deliberately. Over time. And eventually, those who chased quick wins will look around and realize you have advanced far beyond them, without noise, without spectacle, without burnout. That is the power of the long game. Not dramatic. Not loud. But enduring. And endurance, guided by strategy, always outlasts urgency. Chapter 15, Becoming the Calm Strategist. At the beginning of this audiobook, we challenged a belief. The belief that power must be loud, that intelligence must be displayed, that winning must be visible. Now, after everything we have explored, observation, emotional control, projection, silence, patience, detachment, long-term thinking, something should feel different inside you. Not louder. Quieter. More grounded. Strategic thinking is no longer a concept. It is becoming an identity. And identity is what sustains behavior when motivation fades. The calm strategist is not someone who never feels emotion. They feel everything. But they are not governed by it. They are not provoked into urgency. They are not baited into ego battles. They are not seduced by short-term validation. They understand something most people overlook. Self-control is a competitive advantage. In rooms where others rush to speak, they observe. In moments where others defend immediately, they pause. In situations where others panic, they assess. This is not passivity. It is command. The calm strategist does not need to prove intelligence. They demonstrate it through outcomes. They do not chase recognition. They build positioning. They do not fight every challenge. They choose the battles that matter. And because they choose carefully, their moves carry weight. Over the past chapters, you have learned how to see the board before acting. How to read subtle signals. How to detach without disconnecting. How to project consequences. How to use silence as strength. How to think beyond immediate emotion. But knowledge alone does not transform you. Repetition does. Strategic thinking becomes natural when pausing becomes habitual. When someone pressures you, you breathe instead of reacting. When opportunity appears, you evaluate instead of lunging. When conflict rises, You observe patterns instead of defending ego. You begin asking different questions. What is really happening here? What is the long-term effect? Who benefits from this urgency? What pattern am I reinforcing? And slowly, something powerful happens. You stop feeling behind. You stop feeling emotionally hijacked. You stop feeling outmaneuvered in conversations. You stop feeling drained by avoidable drama. Because you are no longer playing checkers in a chess environment. You are thinking structurally. The calm strategist also understands restraint. Not every truth needs to be spoken. Not every mistake needs immediate correction. Not every opinion deserves engagement. Sometimes silence protects your leverage. Sometimes timing multiplies impact. Sometimes walking away preserves more power than winning an argument. This identity does not make you cold. It makes you composed. It does not make you distant. It makes you deliberate. You become someone who studies dynamics before participating in them. In the workplace, this changes everything. You recognize politics without being consumed by it. You understand personalities without being manipulated by them. You position yourself without announcing your intentions. As an entrepreneur or leader, you stop chasing every opportunity. You focus on aligned moves that compound. As someone battling burnout, you stop reacting to every demand. You protect your energy strategically. As an emotionally overwhelmed adult, you stop living in survival mode. You begin living in design mode. The calm strategist is not rigid. They adapt. But adaptation does not mean instability. It means informed movement. You are not trying to control the world. You are learning to control your response to it. And that alone changes outcomes. Over time, others notice something about you. You do not escalate easily. You do not panic publicly. You do not commit impulsively. Your presence feels steady. And steadiness is rare. In a world addicted to speed and reaction, composure stands out. Not loudly. Quietly. Strategic thinkers win quietly because they do not need applause. They need alignment. They measure success by positioning, not praise. They understand that the loudest moment is rarely the most important one. The real victories are subtle. Avoided conflict. Prevented mistake. Well-timed decision. Unspoken boundary. Delayed gratification that compounds over years. These victories rarely trend. But they build empires of stability. Becoming the calm strategist is not about being perfect. You will still react sometimes. You will still misjudge occasionally. But you will recover faster. Because you now understand the system. Pause. Observe. Project. Position. This is no longer a technique. It is who you are becoming. And as this identity strengthens, something profound happens. You no longer feel the need to rush life. You move with it. You do not chase power. You cultivate it internally. You do not demand respect. You embody it. You do not try to win every moment. You build toward lasting advantage. This is the art. Not dramatic. Not flashy. Disciplined. Measured. Calm. And quietly ahead. Take a breath here. Notice the difference in how you now see situations. You are no longer just reacting to events. You are interpreting patterns. You are not trapped inside moments. You are evaluating trajectories. That shift, from reaction to strategy, changes everything. You are no longer playing for attention. You are playing for alignment. And alignment, sustained over time, always outperforms noise. This is the calm strategist. And this is now available to you. Not someday. Now. Quietly. If this audiobook shifted how you see yourself, even slightly, then it has done its work. Strategic thinking is not something you finish learning. It is something you practice daily. And the more you practice it, the more composed, perceptive, and quietly powerful you become. If this resonated with you, take a moment to support the channel. Like this video so more thoughtful, intelligent adults can access grounded guidance instead of noise. Subscribe to the channel so you continue developing calm authority, emotional mastery, and strategic clarity. And before you leave, reflect on this. What situation in your life right now requires less reaction and more strategy? Sit with that question. Your next move does not need to be louder. It needs to be wiser. I will see you in the next audiobook.